Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. This is going to be a bit of a break from the books. I'm going to be talking about my favorite movies that I've watched in 2020. So I'll talk about my 8 favorites, and this will be in reverse order, so saving my most favorite film for last. Number 8, The Winslow Boy, 1999. There's actually 2 or 3 versions of this film. My family and I watched both this version and one of the older ones. I can't remember what year it was. It was a black and white adaptation. I personally preferred this newer version of the story. It's about a family in Edwardian times, and the youngest son of this family is in the Naval Academy for boys, and he gets in trouble with the academy and is sent home. And his father believes that his son hasn't done anything wrong and is determined to clear the family name. So this is a very slow story. It's one that I think would appeal to readers of E.M. Forster. There's not a lot of action, but it's a very moving story of how this family comes together and supports the son. It's about this lawyer played by Jeremy Northam who takes on the case, and the tension between him and the oldest daughter in the family who doesn't like the lawyer and doesn't trust him. So there's kind of a lot of character development, relationships going on. But it's a nice quiet film, definitely for those who are fond of costume dramas. Number 7 is an older movie called Shadow of a Doubt. So my family and I have been going through this project watching all or most of Alfred Hitchcock's films. And Alfred Hitchcock being the director of films like Psycho, Rear Window, Vertigo, a lot of these older thrillers. This was one of my favorites of his, probably of all time. And we've seen quite a few of his by now. This takes place in, I want to say, 40s America, so I think this would have been a contemporary film at the time. And it's about this family whose long lost uncle is coming to visit them, but what they don't know is that he has this really dark secret, and that ends up becoming a source of conflict in the family and actually endangers this daughter. I really enjoyed how the tension was gradually built up, and there wasn't anything too crazy in it. Like sometimes Hitchcock can really get carried away with the wacky elements, but this felt a little more down to earth, but still very scary, and the acting was superb by the 2 leads. So really enjoyed this film. It's just a really good black and white thriller. Another really good black and white thriller, also by Hitchcock, is Notorious. Ingrid Bergman plays a German woman who has past ties to Nazis, but she herself has renounced all of that and has no more to do with it. Cary Grant plays a government agent who asks her to try to get together with this old boyfriend of hers, played by Claude Rains, and get some inside information on these Nazis whom they're trying to track down. The beginning of this movie was pretty slow and didn't really care for the initial romance, but it really gets better as the movie goes on, so little patience here pays off. I have to laugh at this poster because Claude Rains is like really small, but I think we all thought that he stole the show. And there was actually really good chemistry between him and Bergman. Cary Grant was fine, but I think the other 2 actors really shine in this one. So this was very suspenseful. Again, the cinematography is always good in a Hitchcock film, and it was superb here. The angles, the lighting, just really good. And the script was very suspenseful. So would recommend Notorious. Number 5. So I think I watched like only 1 or 2 TV series this year. This was the main one that I enjoyed, and it's kind of like one of those series you're going to either love or hate, probably. It's hard to describe it. It's sort of like James Bond meets 1984 meets Alice in Wonderland. Like there's all these weird wacky elements. Basic plot is you have this guy and he wants to retire from the spy business. He's just done. And as he's packing up to retire and leave, he gets kidnapped by this unknown organization, and they place him in this contrived fictional village. It's literally called The Village. This village is rigged with all kinds of surveillance technology and all kinds of spies to try to get him to talk, to give information about his past. One thing I will say about the series is it's very uneven. Some of the episodes are absolutely brilliant. Some of the best dystopian storytelling I've ever encountered. Some of the other episodes are definitely filler or just not so great. So it's kind of uneven, but I really enjoyed it. It's got that great 60s style, and yeah, it's worth a try if you like vintage sci-fi / dystopian. Number 4, A Hidden Life. So kind of getting into the newer films here. This one was a film I watched fairly early in the year, and it's about a man. It's based on a true story about this Austrian farmer who is pressured to swear allegiance to Hitler during World War II, and he refuses. And so the movie is about the lead up to that, and then about what happens after he refuses and decides to just live by his conscience. And this film was first of all, it is very long. So this film almost feels like it's happening in real time. The director really took a lot of time with each scene, and just kind of lets all of these emotions build up and then sit with you for long extended scenes. So if you don't really like slow films, or even if you do, this might be a bit slow for you. Nonetheless, I thought the script was absolutely amazing. Most films of this topic, or I don't want to say most films, but a lot of films about this topic can oversimplify things a bit for us modern viewers, and this film doesn't do that. It's very realistic. It shows you the psychological changes in this family. This decision that he makes affects all of them, and it talks about how his community reacts to his decision as well. And the other neat thing about this is it's set in this beautiful, idyllic, picturesque community in the mountains. And it really makes you think about, what happens to everyday people when these kinds of moral conflicts come up. It's not just, world leaders and soldiers and those kinds of people that have to make these decisions, but just as much the everyday everyman, if you will. So I thought this film was really, really thought-provoking and really caused a lot of discussion afterwards. So would recommend A Hidden Life, especially if you're a Christian or just interested in topics about conscience. Number 3 is a indie film called Europa Report from 2013. This is science fiction, as you can see by the cover. This is probably my favorite science fiction film, maybe alongside 1 or 2 Star Trek films, but really loved Europa Report. It's about this group of scientists who set off to go investigate Europa, and Europa is one of the moons of Jupiter. So the film is told and shot in the form of found footage, so-called. So basically, much of the movie looks like it's pieces of security footage, vlogs, just these, natural pieces of video footage that you'd pull from everyday life. I wasn't sure if I was going to like the found footage approach. My main criticism of it is that it is a little tricky to follow sometimes, but if you're paying attention, and this is a movie you can't really just play in the background, you do have to focus on this one. If you're paying attention, you'll figure it out. There were a lot of things that just really worked for me in this film. There's another movie that came out last year called Ad Astra with Brad Pitt, and that film was also about going far into space and the psychological effects that has on people. This film is also about that, but this does it much better because our characters are very realistic. They all seem like people you would know in real life or maybe work with. Like Ad Astra, it covers topics of psychology, commercialization / glorification of space, a little more subtly, but I feel like there were definitely pieces of that. Certainly the glorification and just the way people back home were viewing this mission versus how the scientists ended up viewing the mission. The characters are, again, amazing. There's a fair amount of diversity on this vessel, but it's not in your face. It's very subtle, which I thought was a strong point. I felt a lot of empathy for all of them, and there wasn't one that particularly stood out as the main character, except, well, I guess there was one female character who was supposed to be the main character, but I enjoyed how it felt like a crew and you just got to understand or learn about each one as individuals. This is one of the most haunting films I've ever watched. The score was beautiful. I would say, while it doesn't have any of the explicit gore of Ad Astra, this is definitely a scary film, but in a good way. It's very well done. So that's one of my favorites, probably of all time. Number 2 on my list is Frantz from 2016. This is another lesser known film, and yet I think unduly so. This film takes place after World War I, and it's about this young man named Frantz, who's a Frenchman, and he comes to this German village to find the family of a friend that he had in the war, and the friend was German. So he meets his friend's sister, Anna, who's pictured here, and it's a very difficult meeting because Anna's family is, they're very, the wounds of the war are still raw in their family, and the father does not want to be around this Frenchman because of the loss of his own son killed by Frenchmen. So a big theme of the movie is prejudice between these two groups of people who, are not that dissimilar in terms of race and even to some extent culture, but there's huge animosity between these two groups still. Frantz is just trying to find a way to basically heal his soul, right? And so there is sort of a romance that develops between him and Anna, but I won't go into any more details because then it would be spoilery. I thought it was a very touching film, very romantic, and I loved the style it was shot in. It was very sensitively scripted, and the black and white was just very, very effective and very artistic. Lots of the shots just look like pieces of art. The only thing I would say, there was a subplot towards the end that I feel like actually weakened the plot a little bit, but it's pretty minor. Overall, really loved this film. I'd say it's definitely suitable for teenagers and up, and I just think it was such a beautiful film. Just hits on a lot of great themes that are still relevant today. Okay, my favorite movie that I've seen this year by far is called A Taxi Driver. Last film I showed you was a German film, I believe, or French. But this film is Korean, so foreign films starting to make their way onto my viewing list. I'm so glad I gave this one a try. I wasn't sure by this, kind of goofy cover whether I was going to like it or not. But I absolutely loved this film. A Taxi Driver takes place in 1980s Korea, South Korea, and it's really centered around this historical event called the Gwangju Uprising. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't know a lot about that history. It's not something I have studied in depth. I've read about it on Wikipedia, but I'm not in a position to say whether this movie is historically accurate, etc. So I was viewing this movie more from the aspect of a dystopian thriller, because basically what happens in the story is there's this city in Korea, and the people there are being oppressed by the government, like literally mowed down in the streets. And meanwhile, other people in other parts of Korea don't know this is happening. The main character here is a taxi driver, as the title indicates, and he lives in Seoul, and he has never been to Gwangju. He's more worried about his personal life. He has issues with his landlady and has trouble finding enough work to pay his rent, and he's got a daughter to take care of. He's a widower. So that's the center of his world, and that's really all he cares about. Through some rather devious means, he learns that there is a foreigner, a German, who wants to be driven to Gwangju. And again, this taxi driver doesn't really know that there's like all this violence going on there, and it's not been publicized. So he cheerfully takes this German to Gwangju. It's not until he gets closer to the city that he realizes there's violence going on there, and that his passenger is not a missionary or just a businessman, but actually a journalist coming to get the truth on what's going on. So things really escalate from there, as you can imagine. And this story really, for me, was brilliant because there's like this really strange friendship developing between the taxi driver and the journalist. And I'm not going to give anything away, but like it involves multiple betrayals and forgivenesses and just all kinds of crazy things happening as they're trying to survive in this city that's been taken over by the government in brute force, and trying to get the truth on what's happening without getting caught by the authorities. This is a very action-packed movie. There's some really, really good scenes. I'm not going to give anything else away. I just want to say this is worth your time. At least I think it is, if you like these kinds of stories about unlikely friendships, humans working together, and dystopian type of plots. Yeah, I liked this movie so much I actually watched it immediately after watching it first through. So, and I know I'll watch it again before long. So really enjoy this film. Pleasant surprise. Definitely the best film I've watched this year so far. That's all I had for this video. Let me know your favorite films of 2020 so far. And I will probably be having some book reviews coming up shortly, but I did want to share this in case, anyone has interests in the kind of movies I watch or would like to see more of these videos in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.